Welcome to the channel where all you gotta do is dyno the Birkin. Okay, so this is where the original speed pickup was. It did have 100 teeth on this truth wheel here, the trigger wheel. So I put it up on the mill and kind of machined a lot of the teeth away. So now it has 10 active teeth. And then this is the original bracket that the sensor was on. So all I did was found that new 5-volt sensor and bolted it into the same bracket. I had to use a slightly smaller bolt because the space between the bolt and the sensor was a few millimeters different. So that was a fairly easy thing. Wired it up to the same electrical hose to go over into the panel here. So for the tie downs outside here, I just drilled a hole with my auger, post hole digger auger thing, and dumped a bag of cement in there. I think 1.5 bags per each of these, and then let it cure, and then I drilled holes and mounted this tie down just like inside. So for tie downs on the inside, I put them like really far away from where I would be walking. So they're off at the edges of the shop here. So I don't trip over them. You gotta access them under the toolbox, but that's fine. And then I put them pretty far in front of where the car is going to be, because I have pretty small cars, but in case I wanted to put a real size car in here, they wouldn't be at, 12 degrees from the front. So yeah, that's how I tie the car down. So the other thing that I've done is I got the KM-tronic thing that's inside here, and I can just push a button on the screen and I can make this thing go up and down. It's got air cylinders on there and a little solenoid in here. So you can clack that and raise the car up. I also have a fan inside here that's much bigger than the original fan. Probably can't see it down there, but put a picture up here. And then I can also turn this on. This is the fan for if you have an intercooler. We can shoot that through the intercooler. And then I have this fan and this fan. So they're all on hotkeys. So if you're sitting in the car on a laptop and, you know, all these fans on makes a ton of noise. So you can just, you know, push function keys to turn them off. So that's super nice. I like how that's integrated. My panel. I don't have a fan in here, but I did open this up so I could blow a little fan air on this thing if this thing gets hot. But this is monitored, the temperature that's monitored. So I can put a, you know, red light flashes or something if it gets too hot. But so far it only gains a couple degrees. This is the torque arm that I built, because this didn't come with a torque arm. I don't know if there is one or it just didn't come with it, but I bought this thing used for, you know, somebody that went out of the dynoing business. So anyway, there was already a bolt hole here that's on a little bit of an angle. I think it's drilled right through into the center. So I utilized that M8 bolt and I made this arm. So this is, to this hole here is precisely 40 inches. I mean, precisely being within, you know, probably a millimeter, probably less than a millimeter actually. So that's what I use as a calibration arm. And then I had these old crankshafts laying around from that V-twin I designed 25 years, 30 years ago, whatever it was. I took them over to my local UPS place and weighed them. I just threw them up there while they, you know, while they weren't busy and there weren't customers in there. So I weighed both of those, and that one weighs 28 pounds, that one weighs 26 pounds, and I just hang those off of here, and that gives me my calibration weight. So basically the way I calibrate it is, so you put this torque on there, it gives you about 10 foot-pounds, just because that weighs something and it puts a lever arm on it. So it gives you about 10 foot-pounds. So you just clear that, you just zero that out. And then you push calibrate button, load it, and then you put these guys on there. And then you tell it the number of 40 inches and you tell it 54 pounds, and you go calibrate. And then you're essentially done, except for when you take this arm off, it's going to say negative 9, 10 pounds, whatever it is, 10 foot-pounds, and then you just push zero again, and so then it's calibrated. Now, unfortunately, when I did that, and I put the numbers in, because this roller has a 44 tooth belt on it, and this that drives the dynamometer has a 30 tooth belt in it, so it's overdriven by 47%. So if you calibrate this thing 1-to-1, right, this thing is going to have less torque. When you load that up, it's going to have less torque than it really has at the wheel or at the roller. So that's not right. So the power is correct, except for, like, this thing, whatever power it's absorbing, it's the foot-pounds, which is going to come out in the calibration on how much load you're putting on it, times the speed divided by 252, if it's, you know, if it's foot-pounds and horsepower and stuff. But the little control inside this box doesn't know how fast that's spinning. The only RPM signal it has is the one I just showed you, which is over here, and that's roller speed, which is fine. So I called up I sent an email to the people that make this stuff, blue boxes, YourDyno, and I said, hey, what am I where do I put in the ratio? And he's like, oh, no, you just lie to it. Like, what do you mean you lie to it? Yeah, you just tell it the roller's a different size or the torque arm's a different size. And he's like, well, that seems like a bad idea. I don't really like doing that. In my past life where I've, dynoed stuff and the customer comes out, they want to see your calibration weights. We didn't have weights that look like crankshaft, but we did actually have calibration weights that the number, the pounds of calibration weight was stamped into it, and they didn't believe us. So we had to walk over. Luckily, we were right next to the UPS store, and we walked over to the UPS store, said, hey, can we put these weights on your scale? And then the OEM manufacturer guys watched us put the weights on there and see that they weighed just the same as what it was stamped on there. So, but that's pretty normal. And then they also, when they put it on the dyno, they make sure, that was an engine dyno, so engine speed and dyno speed, they're looking at their ECU data from their research console and, making sure it's the same as what the dyno says, right? So make sure you got speed right. Those are the other two things you need. And then the torque arm length. So they'd see the torque arm and watch us calibrate it and measure with a ruler. If you're going to cheat, you're not going to cheat by, a half a millimeter. You're going to cheat by a lot. So that's pretty normal that people want to make sure that the dyno calibration is correct. And I think if you lie to it a lot, I don't think you could do that. Now, this is just my own personal, car and junk stuff in here. So does that really matter? No. But I think the YourDyno guys should have something where you don't have to lie to it. So anyway, that's what I told him in not so many words. And so, to my surprise, he actually made a new software version, and he put some features in there where you could put the ratio. So I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. Thank you, appreciate that. And then, so I set it up the way it said to set it up in the menus, which was, there's two places to put the ratio in there. And both of those ratios ended up being the same. Like 1.46666 was the number, 44/30. And so that was in two places, one in the speed frequency channel and one in the dyno brake channel or something like that. Anyway, I put them both in there. And then we were trying to dyno the Sonda, and it was just giving us like really stupid numbers, 800 horsepower and stuff like that. No, I'm sorry, we don't have enough fuel for that. And that's turbocharged, so I was like, well, I'll just put, and we were trying to tune it as well. So trying to tune a dyno and trying to tune a car at the same time, like that's not a great recipe for success. So anyways, I just put the Birkin on there, and unfortunately the wheels are too small in diameter, so the exhaust actually rubs on the roller with the stock wheels on there. So I got some old Sonda wheels and tires and threw them on there. They're a little bit taller, and now I have a tiny bit of clearance now. Yeah, 3/4 of an inch. But anyway, I digress. So I put this thing on there, and I ran it as, with those 1.47 numbers in there, calibrated it with the calibration arm, and it wasn't even close. It was saying this thing is making 400 horsepower. And yeah, it's got a big cam in it and header and ITBs and blah, 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 but there's no way it makes 400 horsepower. I don't have enough fuel injector for that. So I knew that was wrong. So I started, I sent some emails to Justin at YourDyno, and he basically just told me I'm full of shit and I'm doing it wrong. Like, you must be doing it wrong. Like, dude, I've been playing with dynos for 35 years. Like, no, this is just wrong. It's not even close. Like, this thing should make between 150 and 200 horsepower. Like, I don't know. I never had it on the dyno before, but that's what it should make. Somewhere in there. And 400 is not even in the ballpark. So something's wrong. So anyway, I didn't get any good results. And trying to email with this guy is, you know, challenging because he's in Norway. So, you know, you send him an email and you wait a day and then you send something back that says, you're an idiot. Try what I told you to do in the first place, which you did. And then anyway, it was just like week of back and forth where I wasn't getting anywhere. So not knowing what is inside the information, inside the program that he changed for me, which I appreciate, I just set it all back to 0. It's like, okay, if I set it back to 0, what do I got? And it came out in like a more reasonable area. It was about 100 horsepower, 100. I didn't like wind it up to 8 grand or anything. But it was like 100 horsepower, 98 or something like that at 5,000 RPM, 5,200 RPM, something like that. So that seems reasonable, right? Because this thing goes to, you know, 7,500 or something, 8,000. So putting it back to 0 made it way closer. But the reason it's not right is because this thing isn't 1-to-1. So the torque that this is reading is actually less. And this has to be right, because one of the things he also is pretty adamant about is don't use the inertia of the dyno roller. Even though I know what the inertia of this roller is because it's, you know, set from the factory, but whatever. But I tried to set the dyno roller by doing his little, you know, do a ramp up and a ramp down and then change the inertia till they line up. Fine, that works, except for now you have the inertia of the car, engine, transmission, drivetrain, axles, wheels, tires, all that stuff, which shouldn't be part of the dyno. But whatever, I did it anyway. But that doesn't work because the torque arm is wrong. The torque arm, like, it's the torque here, but it only has a speed of here. So anyway, I'm going to recalibrate this guy, and I'm going to lie to it, just like he told me to do a year ago or whatever it was, which I shouldn't have to do. But whatever. I don't know what's happening inside of his box, so I just put him at 1. You can multiply by 1, you can divide by 1, you can multiply by the square of 1 or the square root of 1. Whatever he's doing is going to be fine if I put 1s in there. And then I can just, then I know what's happening. I can just take this torque arm and instead of telling it it's 40 inches, I can tell it it's, you know, 40 times 1.46666. Yeah, I already calculated it. I need to tell it it's 79.2 pounds instead of 54 pounds. And then it should be calibrated to that fraction. The other thing that I didn't like about his putting the ratio in there is he doesn't give you a ratio, like a fraction ratio. He gives you like 2 digits. So you can only put 1.47 in there. You can't put 1.46. So that should be like 44/30, which is how normal people do that. But fractions are hard, I guess. So anyway, that's kind of where we are. After I did those things, I still have a few little quirky things that I don't like about the software, but I mean, they're not stopping it from working and stuff like that. A couple of things that I don't like about this setup right now is I don't have a RPM signal going into the data acquisition system over here. So I have to use the gear ratio, and then every car is going to have different wheel size, different transmission ratios, rear end ratios, blah, 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 blah. So you have to set that up every time, which is, I mean, not ideal, right? You have to rely on the speedometer being correct and tach being correct and stuff like that. So there's, you know, it takes a little bit longer, but it works. But with modern cars, you can't just put an inductive. This one doesn't have inductive, you know, stuff. So most cars these days don't have a way to do that. Actually, this one does have spark plug wire, so I guess I could put an inductive pickup on this guy. But the Sonda has a, you know, coil pack, so that you can't do. So I think that's about all my complaints. The other thing that I originally was going to hook up is I got this variable speed drive, which is not hooked up right now, because there is a 3-phase motor that drives these, and I think it's for like setting speedometers and junk like that, like checking speedometers. But the problem with this thing is, well, it's not a problem, it's just part of dyno. It's like this sits on the roller or sits on the ground all night, and then you roll it onto the dyno, and now there's flat spots in the tires. I mean, unless you jack the car up, I guess you could jack the car up and it wouldn't be a problem. But what I do is just I just run it for, you know, 5 minutes or whatever. It gets a little heat to the tires, and then those floppity bumps get out of there, and then you can do a run. You gotta warm up the oil and the engine and the antifreeze and everything anyway. So I just kind of run it for 5 minutes or whatever, and it gets a little bit of heat into the tires, kind of softens the rubber up, and then those flat spots kind of go away. So the other thing I'd kind of like to do is get a new belt for this, because God only knows how old this belt is. I bought this thing used for, you know, $1,000. So it could come apart any minute. I don't run it like this. I have this guardy doodle I just took off to show how the torque arm thing fits on there and whatnot. So anyway, yeah, we'll be doing more dyno testing on this and the Sonda and whatever else, Bronco, Mustang, you know, eventually. And maybe some customer cars. I have a bunch of friends that have cars, you know, car people have friends that are car people, so. And it's really, I tried to find a dyno shop in the Bay Area, and they're like 4 months out. Like, you can't even make an appointment for 4 months. It's like, oh, that's not great. I mean, if I was a better planner, maybe it would be, but I'm not a very good planner. So anyway, I have a dyno now, and I can do it whenever my neighbors aren't complaining. I'm pretty good up here. Like, I have a skid steer in kind of a residential neighborhood, and like everybody's like, yeah, whatever, I don't care, it's fine. So it's not really, I mean, it's residential, but it's, you know, it's kind of in the country. So they put up with me. Anyway, if you like this content and want more similar, just push the like and subscribe button, and, you know, go check out some of my older videos on, you know, when I bought this thing and put it in the ground, cement work, this floor that I'm standing on, the shed that I'm in, you know, I have videos on all that junk, and much more. From the mundane to the outrageous. That's how I do it.